am going to be talking about the Treasure Trove Unit, the team, just giving a bit of an update of what's been going on the past couple of years. There's been quite a lot. Before moving on to talk about some of our big hard cases that we've been dealing with, it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I'm hoping to link those two themes together, but we'll see how successfully I do that. So before I move from this slide, just to point out this really lovely find, a Romano-British bull figurine, which was recently allocated to the Tremontian Trust Museum. A really exciting find. I'm not going to be talking about this any further, so take it in. It's really unusual. We don't see these things very often. It's a lovely find. So let's start off with the team. So I realised that naming a talk, What's New with the TTU, is great, it rhymes, but I'm not sure how many people in the audience know what TTU stands for. So it's the Treasure Trove Unit. We deal with archaeological finds found in Scotland. Here is the current team. Up until 2021, we were a team of 2. So as you can see, we've expanded quite a lot over the past couple of years. Myself as manager, and then we have 5 Treasure Trove officers. We are very much the front-facing side of the Treasure Trove system, which I'll go into in a second. And they are the people that meet with finders, conduct outreach events. They're taking in artifacts, mostly found by metal detectorists, but also through field walking, gardening, walking your dog, whatever activity you're doing, finding archaeological finds, they are the people that are dealing with them. We're very lucky that we're currently a team of 6, but I should mention that only 3 of us are permanent members of staff. The other 3 are fixed term until 2026. So what is Treasure Trove? Well, in Scots common law, bond of vacantia or ownerless goods is crown property. That means that anything archaeological that is ownerless belongs to the crown. And that's why we're involved. That's why we are dealing with it. The Crown's representative in Scotland is the King's and Lord Treasurer's Remembrancer, who I'll refer to as the KLCR going forward. It's a very long title and very difficult to say many, many times in a presentation. So if you find something in your garden, if you're metal detecting, if there is no discernible owner of that material, it needs to be reported to us. There are no real limitations on what that object could be in terms of age or material. So we're not just dealing with precious metal. We're not just dealing with the gold and the silver. We're dealing with the lithics. We're dealing with textile. We're dealing with ceramics. It is everything. It just has to be ownerless. So as you may imagine, that's quite a lot of material. We're a team of 6 covering the whole of Scotland, dealing with all material that is ownerless found in Scotland. So we're quite busy, to put it simply. I've mentioned metal detecting and activities where you might find artifacts. We also deal with excavation assemblages as well. So we've already seen a couple today. Eventually, they will come through the Treasure Trove process, as will any others that are going to be spoken about today. If there are artifacts, it comes through us. What we don't deal with currently are fossils, human remains, and unworked animal bone. As I said, these objects have to have been previously owned for them to become ownerless. That's what we're looking for. And that's what needs to be reported. And just to give you an idea of what we do with those finds, as I mentioned, the Treasure Trove officers do a lot of outreach. That forms finds days. We do talks like this. I always have somebody come up to me afterwards say, oh, actually, I found something in my garden the other day. Do you need me to report it? Any opportunity for us to get out into the local areas, local community, talk to metal detectorists in particular, but anybody that has an interest in archaeology is a really good opportunity to see these finds and take them in so that we can look at them. So the object is reported to us and we're determining significance, importance to an extent. We are determining what artifacts should be claimed by the Crown and allocated to museums for preservation. We're looking at not just, again, the precious metal side of things. We're looking at whether those artifacts are unusual in some way, whether they're rare, whether they're adding to a known corpus, if they're part of a known site. It might be that actually the artifact itself isn't particularly exciting, but actually where it comes from is. And that's the important thing. And that's why it needs to be preserved. It may be that there's an existing assemblage and this forms part of that assemblage. So it's not just about the object, it is also about the context, the find spot, all of that information coming together, allowing us to determine whether or not these objects should be claimed. If we determine, does it need to be claimed, does it need to be allocated to a museum, we are still recording those objects, we are still photographing, measuring, we are recording find spots. So we've got a lovely database full of data. And then we're disclaiming that object and handing it back to the finder. Sometimes the data is the most important thing. We record everything as far as we can, unless it's natural, unless it's really modern, a bit of tractor. We don't want to record that, but really we're trying to record as much as possible. Because although, again, that object in front of us may not be important, in 10 years' time, something else could come up. It gives us context for that find. So it's all Crown property, it's all data. That's what we're trying to record. For those objects that are claimed, we produce a report, we do a bit more research. We write those reports for the museums so that they can determine whether or not they want to acquire the material. So although I'm saying allocation, actually museum services have to apply for the material. We're not just saying, you can have this, you can have this. The museums apply for it, and they need to determine whether those objects fit within their collections, whether it's something they want to acquire, whether it isn't something they want to acquire. We also do an estimated valuation. So finders are usually eligible for an ex gratia award. It is a reward sort of based on market value for those objects, and it is to reward that finder for reporting the finds to us. 3 times a year, we have the Scottish Archaeological Finds Allocation Panel, SAFAC, and they are the ones that make a recommendation to the KLTR where these objects should be allocated to and how much the ex gratia award should be. So although we are making recommendations, the panel also makes recommendations. Ultimately, it is the KLTR that signs off on all of this and is making the decisions. And the very exciting thing for me is that we recently had a review. We have had about 15 months of review of this whole system. So everything I just told you may change slightly in the next 6 to 12 months. I can come back next year to tell you what's changed. But it was a really good time for us to think about what we do and why we do it and how we're doing it. As I said, we were a team of 2 until very recently. So our ability to do outreach, our ability to go out into metal detecting clubs, attending things like rallies, it's been very limited until this point. And being a larger team has already demonstrated how much more we could do. And don't worry, I'll get onto the interesting stuff in a second. But just the flag that the recommendations from this review are now on the KLCR website. There are 12 recommendations. The document is over 80 pages. I don't expect you all to read it thoroughly, but if you are interested, that's where they are. And we're now moving into the implementation period of those recommendations. Okay, so the more interesting thing. Although most finds come to us already out of the ground, sometimes a little bit cleaned up by primarily detectorists, but whoever has dug them out the ground. Sometimes we're very lucky and we have finds that are still in situ. I'm going to talk about 3 cases today that have come up over the past 4 years. Some that you may already have heard about, some maybe you haven't. It's a really, really useful opportunity for us to, understand the context of this particular find, but also when we do get those unstratified random bits and pieces come to us, add context to those finds as well. It adds to our knowledge. It adds to our understanding of the landscape. Most detectorists, I'm going to refer to detectorists, they're the ones finding the meta finds primarily. Most of them are going into ploughed fields. They are finding material that's already been dug out the ground by machinery, and then they are coming along and digging it out again. The archaeology is probably no longer there. But every so often, as I said, we get lucky and we have a real great opportunity to excavate, which is always good fun. And as John said, terrible weather always. A couple of unfortunate hoards to start us off. These coins don't look great on a slide. I promise you they're in really good condition. But actually, yes, on a large screen, you can't really see what you're looking at. This was a hoard of, I think, 9 copper alloy coins, 4th century Roman coins, that came up fairly recently. They are in good condition. We can actually identify them. Usually these coins are really, really poor condition. We know from the finder that they all came out the same hole. Great, a hoard. Unfortunately, we couldn't go to this site because the landowner wouldn't give us permission. So we couldn't explore the site further. Usually when we see coins like this, they are single finds or they're scattered. So this could have been a really good opportunity to understand why or how these coins were buried. A missed opportunity, unfortunately, but still a useful hoard of actually fairly good condition coins. And another one, some really, really lovely finds from East Lothian. We've referred to this as assemblage because although we know where these finds came from, unfortunately, we just sort of know the general area. We don't have individual find spots for each of these objects, so we can't say how they were related to each other. We know they sort of date to around about the same time, this lovely broad 1st to 4th centuries AD. But beyond that, we don't know how they're related to each other. We don't know if they were found close together. We don't know if they were found actually quite far apart. So does that mean they were deposited at different times? Probably. But without the find spot information, we don't know. We did do a site visit for this one. But again, without those find spots, there's not really much else you can say about the find spot. The ring in particular is absolutely stunning. The eyes, although in this image, I think that eye is missing, but they have little sort of dark black blue glass eyes either side, which is just absolutely lovely. It's one of the nicest things that we've had come through the unit. And it's unfortunate that we've lost that just a little bit more information about where these things have come from. I think for the ring, it's gold. Yeah, it's a really lovely thing. But we do have some success stories. So my favorite hoard, the People's Hoard. A few of you may already have heard me talk about this. There's supposed to be another picture up there again. The People's Hoard. So I apologize if you've heard this before. It is going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. But this hoard is a hoard of late Bronze Age, fairly unusual objects. You may recognize the sword at the top, but the other objects are quite unusual. We don't have names for the objects on the far right, which we refer to as donuts, because we don't have any other names for them currently, but they're fittings of some kind. We were really excited with this find because the detectorist had pulled out around 20 objects before he stopped, but actually he'd just sort of come down at the side of the hoard, hadn't really disturbed the main body of it, which is excellent. And of course he called us in and we were out for, I think it was 22 days. It was around about 3 weeks. This is quite unusual for us. Usually we're out for a couple of days. We refer to this as sort of a rescue mission. We're very much focusing on the finds that are in the ground. We're not doing an expansive excavation of the whole field. We're not digging multiple trenches. We're doing one trench. We're recovering the finds and we're understanding that immediate context. So being out for 3 weeks in a valley where it rained most of the time, with material that is, well, you can see not in the best condition, was quite a challenge. The field itself was quite featureless, actually. There wasn't really much we could say about it. We had a look at maps online. There's nothing really recorded. We did undertake a geophysical survey and it showed us nothing, mostly because the field is full of these absolutely massive stones. So any information we got back during that survey was just noise. But what we do know, because we were able to excavate, is that there were post holes. I will show you an image in a second. So we had all these unusual objects. We have the sword. It was buried complete in its wooden scabbard, which is amazing. Some of that wood survived. We have these funny objects on the left here. There's actually 2 separate objects here. They're called rattle pendants. They are interlinked rings with these large pendants hanging off those rings. This is only the 3rd and 4th found in Britain. The first 2 were found in Wales in the 19th century. So it's been a while since some of these have come up. Usually they are found associated with horse gear in Denmark, North Germany, North Poland. So really exciting find. Rather than digging it all out in the field, we block listed it. So here's an image here. On the top left, you can see the hole. That's where the detectorists went down. And you can see the size of trench we're working in. We didn't expand beyond that. That's it. You can also see on the right of the image a lot of gauze. That is where organic material survived. So when I say organic material, I'm talking about the remains of leather, wood, some woven fabric, lots of bits and pieces. Really unusual survival. We couldn't excavate it in the field. We block listed it and excavated it in a lab. But because the finder stopped, he gave us an excellent opportunity to record this site in a way that we would not have been able to do if he'd continued. So preservation of organics aside, we were able to, there we go, 3D model the trench with all the finds still in situ. We were able to take the hoard down to the University of Southampton and get it CT scanned. And this was the first time we saw the sword because of that wood for the scabbard, because of everything around it. We couldn't really see what we were working with. But here we are. We have an excellent record now of what we have in that hoard. The leather are the remains of straps. So those funny donut objects that are fittings were attached to leather straps in some way. Having this sort of record means that in the future, somebody can reconstruct that. Somebody can say, okay, these objects are associated. There's a leather strap running underneath them. Maybe we can create a replica and understand this hoard a little bit more. The next one I want to talk about is from Howgate. It's a much simpler hoard. It comprises of 2 axe heads and a spearhead in 2 pieces. Again, it was metal protected. This is a particularly lovely one. So this dates to the early Bronze Age, but it's sort of the transitional period from the early to middle Bronze Age. The style of the axe heads date to that sort of period. And you have this really beautiful decoration on one of them. Unfortunately, you are missing some of the surface, so the other side is less well preserved, but this one, you can just see 2 different types of decoration. A really, really exciting find. And again, we went out to excavate. Why is there a star? I think it's in my next picture. Again, very small trench, not really too many features. That field had been ploughed quite extensively, so we think that the hoard was only recently disturbed. There wasn't really much to see. That is the pits, and actually you can't really see too much. You can see it when we're on the ground, but that's about it. But what you can see from this image, so thank you to the People's Archaeological Society for doing this lovely drone survey, you can maybe see that we have a stream running along the side, and you have that sort of dark patch in the middle there. We think actually that this was much wetter ground in the past, and actually maybe that's why this hoard was buried there. Without that site visit, we wouldn't have that information. And then the last one, the Dunn's hoard. So I have that's Anthony, who almost is here today, and Fraser Hunter. We were unfortunate with this one because the finder had removed what he thought was all of the material. Not ideal. It means that we now don't know how those objects were associated with each other. But we still did recover some meta finds from the field, which is great. And we have a really, really excellent context. So what Fraser and Anthony found when they went to excavate is that around about half of that trench was quite peaty, was a bit sort of boggy looking. They think it was wet in the past. And then the other half of the trench was sort of a bit of a platform, lots of rubble, considerably different kind of soil. And that may give us an idea of maybe why these objects, which I'll show you in a second, were deposited in this field. And just to give you an idea of where we are, we also have evidence of sort of streams. We think it was much wetter, maybe boggy in the past. I'm speeding up now because I've been in it. And here are some of the objects. So these are handles for vessels. We have a couple hundred objects. I'm only going to show you a select few. These are some of my favorites. They are really exciting. Still a lot more work to be done on this hoard, so I can't tell you too much, but really exciting finds nonetheless. But most of the material look like this. We have a series of studs, different kinds, and this sheet metal. And it was more of this sheet metal that was recovered on site when we excavated. We think this may be the body of vessels that have been flattened, folded, and deposited. Again, because we don't have exact find spots for each of these individual objects, we don't know how they were related. But I think Anthony and Fraser may have a better idea of how this material was deposited, whether it was over a period of time, whether it was fairly close in time based on the artifacts and the dating with those. So again, it's a work in progress, but that collaboration with the metal detectorists, going to site, looking for the context of this material is really important for our work. And now I'm going to seamlessly fit together those two parts of the presentation. Having a review of the whole system has given us a really good opportunity, again, to have a look at why we do things, how we do things. And I think, although we have those couple of success stories, there are a few others that we've had really, really, really good excavations for, but some that we haven't. I think it gives us an opportunity to have a think about how we communicate why finders should leave things in the ground to be excavated. It's in our code of practice that that's what they should do. It's best practice. But we don't really tell them why. We don't really say, you should do this because actually if you do this, look at all this information we can gain from this find. It's not just about the artifacts. It is also about the context. It's also about why. Why are these finds here? How were they deposited? It's not all about the objects. So I think we need to improve our guidelines for finders, make them more accessible, and maybe do more of this sort of thing where we're talking about why we are doing it, why are we excavating. It's important for us to give us context for those immediate finds, those hoards, but it's also important for those finds that don't have that context. Disturbed hoards, scattered hoards. It may give us a better understanding of those objects as well as the cases we're dealing with. And it gives us a general understanding of the landscape as well. We split Scotland between the Treasure Trove officers. So gaining that understanding of the landscape, as well as the local museums, the local finders, gives us a better idea of what should and shouldn't be claimed for those single finds. Gives us a better idea of what is normal for an area and what is unusual. It just gives us more information. And it's also about celebrating successes. I think we don't do that enough. We talk about when things go wrong, don't necessarily talk about when things go right. So celebrating the success of an excavation, the success of the information we've managed to gather, and the understanding we've managed to apply to these hoards and others, I think needs to be celebrated more. And that means that we need to have a look at how we're working. And the review has been a really good opportunity to do that. Seamless. Okay, that's me. Thank you so much for your time.